Hey everyone, this is Ivan Fulun at the 220for220generation.com, and I'm busy with a series or a teaching called Youth Ministry 101 to help youth ministers that start from scratch or that have done some stuff and it isn't working to make a success of the youth ministry. I'm now doing a portion where I give a message to senior pastors. If you're a youth minister or a youth worker and you're having problems in your relationship with your senior pastor, I encourage you to send him the link to this and the videos in this portion where my message to the senior pastors. Send it to him so he can watch them and hear the truth about what is really going on. I'm doing this because I feel that youth pastors need to be treated better, and there's a lot of potential in them which is untapped. The previous session I ended off with the increase, where you should increase your youth pastor salary every year. It's the right thing to do. Like paying your TV license, it's the right thing to do. Increase your pastor salary every year. Everybody else get an increase. Why can't you give him an increase? And I know industry standards are 10, 12, 15%, which is fair. Then there's usually an agreement that there'll be an increase or a permanent position given to the youth pastor after 3 months of probation. This is practiced. It's also practiced in a secular environment. But please, if your agreement is that you're going to make him permanent and increase his salary after 3 months probation period, do so. Don't keep him on the same salary for 2.5 years after that. Honor your word. Because I believe, I don't care how anointed you are and how awesome your services are. If you don't keep your word, there's so much more increase in anointing that you can get. If you sort out that stuff, you will grow and increase. People watch this stuff. People hear things that of how you treat your staff. And I really feel the church is in to treat their staff better. I know a lot of people out there, especially on the internet, rag senior pastors and people in high positions about the salaries they draw and whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you taking care of your people. Very important to honor your youth pastor. He's a very important part of your team. Make him feel part of your staff and team. Don't let him feel inferior and like a young person because he's dealing with young people. He's an important part of your team. Appreciate your youth pastor. Why? He's doing work and sowing seed that you will reap from at a later stage. Remember that a youth pastor doesn't stay in one location. I don't like to do that. I don't like to stay in one location for more than 3 to 5 years. Why? Because I have big potential and I want to influence as many people as possible. I want to build ministries. That's what I want to do. So I have a friend who's been with a pastor for 12 years. Well, maybe that's his cup of tea, to be stable and whatever. But I believe God's people are nomads. God's people are, even they're consistent in the gospel. God uses people in different places. If Paul stayed in Jerusalem or stayed in one place, we won't have all the gospels. We won't have all the books written in the Bible. You know what I mean? Now, appreciating your youth pastor. You must remember in John chapter 4, where Jesus was with the woman of the well. Do you remember her talking to her, and later he met up with his disciples again, and they asked him, where did you get meat? And he said, I have meat you don't know anything about. And the lady made an awesome statement. He said, go, the field is white unto harvest. That means there's a revival coming, youth pastors and senior pastors. You know, there's a revival coming. And he says, go and harvest. Other people worked and sowed where you were. And that's exactly what the youth pastor is doing. He's sowing where you will reap later. Because the people that he grows and he encourages becomes part of what shall we call it? It becomes part of the young adults ministry, and later on becomes part of your church. So he's actually raising up the people for you to work with. Appreciate it. Another thing, pastors, senior pastors, please forget about numbers. I get so irritated when I get a call from my pastor or an email or whatever and asking me, how many people were you? What does that care? Did Jesus worry about numbers? No, he had 12 people he worked with for 3.5 years. That's how the gospel works. The gospel is about multiplication and expansion. But one person cannot talk about, cannot impact and speak to so many people. Don't ask him how many people there were. Ask him maybe how many miracles there were. How many people gave their life to God. How many lives are transformed. What you can ask him is, how many leaders do you have in your team? That's a very important question to ask, because that is what makes an impact. Also, make your support for your youth pastor. In other words, you're behind your youth pastor, which you should be. Make it known publicly to the congregation, to your team, to the elders, the EGP. Tell them that you are behind your youth pastor and everything he does. Why? Remember, you have agreed. And later we're going to talk about communication. It's good for you to go through the whole teaching series of Youth Ministry 101, so that you're on the same page and you know exactly what he's doing, what you should do, and where everything is. So you and him start to think the same. And if you think the same, now you need to make known and ask him, what are the expectations on both sides? What's his expectations of you? What are your expectations of him? And if you have that, you are on the same page. It's very important to do that. And I encountered this once. Don't, when he's speaking and asking questions, see it as he's making demands, but rather see it as items for discussion or negotiation. Every single person that goes for a job interview should have a negotiate his salary, negotiate the terms of his contract. Don't think he's arrogant when he does that. Once all this is sorted out, it clears the confusion. And then what happens and what do happen is, if this stuff doesn't happen and there's this confusion, you're not on the same page, you communicate past each other, you don't honor each other, what happens is the heart of the youth pastor becomes bitter and sour, and he despises you. If all this is in check that I shared with you in the last 5 minutes and maybe a little bit in the previous session, he won't despise you if everything is clear. Remember, a happy and satisfied youth pastor means and equals a prosperous and healthy youth ministry, which in the end adds to your church. Support your youth pastor. Sow into his life. Because I can guarantee you right now that he and his wife and the couple, if they're married, it's good soil. Remember, the seeds that you sow will equal a harvest. There's a big snowball in a cycle. Youth ministry works like this. He impacts young people, they impact other people, and later on there's a huge impact and in fact a revival that's happening, and it's because you sowed into his life. Spend time with him. Disciple him. Don't assume that he has sufficient spiritual input in his life. Most youth pastors are young, they are inexperienced, some of them are even immature. Your responsibility, I'm talking about biblical responsibility, is to have input in his life and to develop leadership skills, his spirituality, and his Christian character. That's very, very important. Look after your youth pastor, because in turn what happens is he looks after the greater ministry. He's a spokesperson, and he will become a spokesperson for the church and for you as his senior pastor, and your character. It's very important. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Please check out the other videos in this series, Youth Ministry 101. Also, look at this specific portion of the series called My Message to the Senior Pastors. Look at that. If you have any questions, rebukes, constructive criticism, anything, email me, Ivan at 220generation.com. Ivan, IVIN, at 220generation.com. I'd love to hear from you. God bless.